Good afternoon. I'm Heather Goldstein. This is my partner, Brian Lawler. We are attorneys at the Van Winkle Law Firm, and here today for another session of our 8-week series, Your Estate Planning Questions Answered. And today's topic is paying for care without breaking the bank. Before we get started, we want you to know a couple of things. If you're interested in any of the other sessions of the series, they're all still available on Facebook. If you go to @the Van Winkle Law Firm, you will find 16 sessions. And our presentations are not specific to any one particular person's situation. They're based on the questions that clients most frequently ask us in our estate planning and elder law practice. But if you hear anything today that makes you think that might apply to your situation, then we certainly encourage you to meet with an attorney to explore that more deeply. Finally, we're mostly dealing with North Carolina law. There are some parallels among states, and our attorneys are licensed in multiple jurisdictions, but we're focusing primarily on North Carolina law. So with all of that said, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Lawler to introduce our topic for today.
Thank you so much, Heather, and thank you all so much for joining us today. We are excited to have you all here today, and we're going to be talking a little bit about paying for long-term care without breaking the bank and how important it is or being able to provide you some strategies on thinking about long-term care and how you can go about affording something or paying for something that on the surface appears to be totally unaffordable. So here's the good news and maybe some bad news, and maybe I think it's good news, hopefully it's good news for all of you, but the truth of the matter is that people are living longer now than ever before in human history. People are living longer and healthier lives because of advances in science or just in the way in which we, nutrition and health and all the things that come with that. With that comes people are working longer, working much longer than they ever did. They're working well into their 60s and 70s and even beyond in many cases. People are earning more than they historically historically did because of that. And also people are feeling a lot more freedom to move around this great country that we live in and to be much more migratory and mobile. So it used to be that you would never leave the block that your family lived on, that your mother lived up the road, your siblings lived around the corner, and your kids lived just down the street or in your basement, and you would never leave. Because that was your people, that was your community who could help take care of you when you got older and you couldn't take care of yourself. But now people are leaving, they're moving, they're coming south, they're going north, they're going west. They're sort of taking life by the horns and saying, I'm just going to go wherever I want to go, and not necessarily be beholden to living next to where my kids might be. So that's all really great, but with that good news, unfortunately, comes some unfortunate and not so good news. And so one of the things that we need to be thinking about is that probably a third of us in our lifetimes are going to suffer some form of cognitive impairment, whether that be a temporary cognitive impairment because of an illness or an acute injury, or something more permanent as a result of a chronic illness. As a result of that, or maybe because of that, over 70%, statistically, over 70% of us are going to experience some type of need for long-term care. And we'll talk about what that means, what long-term care means, but essentially it's something beyond just your traditional going to the doctor once a year for a physical. It's something a little bit more involved in terms of your being able to sustain at home or wherever you are in the long term. It creates a situation where people are much more vulnerable to all kinds of risks. But it also means that we have to plan in a non-traditional way. So the AARP has recently, has released a statistic several years ago that said over 10,000 people are turning 65 every day. And that will occur at least until the 2030s. I mean, we're talking about millions of people that are sort of reaching that retirement age that was never expected. And to put that into context, in the 1930s, when Social Security was enacted, the life expectancy was only 62. So policy-wise, we never expected people to actually live to retirement. We never expected people to access Social Security and Medicare and all the needs, the long-term healthcare needs that we're now facing. Unfortunately, policy hasn't kept up with reality. And now we're in a situation where people are living till their 80s or their 90s, and they need that long-term care, and they didn't plan for it. We just didn't save right for it. So there are different types of long-term care out there. They're not all living in nursing homes. And so let's explore that a little bit.
Sure. So that's a great segue. I was thinking as Brian was talking, we've given this, Before COVID, Brian and I used to do a version of this talk in person with groups of people as often as we could. We haven't been able to do that recently, but when we do it in person, we have a great video that we show about just how long people are living and how our societal systems aren't really designed to keep up with that. And one of the best lines in the video is, "It's not good for anyone to go on vacation for 30 years, which is essentially what we all look forward to doing at the end of our life if we're lucky. My father-in-law might beg to differ about how great it is to be on vacation for 30 years. In any event, let's talk about for a minute the options for end-of-life care or end-of-life living arrangements and the various sources, various ways to pay for those. So first is to age in place. This is hands down what most people hope that they are able to do in their home, in a comfortable environment, with support or care if needed to allow them to stay there. Aging in place in your home is exclusively a private pay arrangement. If you need help, you'll either have to pay for it or hopefully you have friends or family who can assist you at no cost. There might be, if you are a veteran, there's something called a VA aid and attendance benefit, and that is very specific limited benefit for vets and their spouses who served at least 90 days during a period of active duty in wartime. And I won't go into all those qualifications, but there's specific qualifier. But if you qualify for aid and attendance, then you might be able to get some funds to help you age in place in your home. But other than VA benefits, you're looking at paying for it. You might have a paid caregiver who comes in your home. You might have a family member who comes in to support you as needed or who actually lives with you. And you might be paying that family member, or that family member might be offering their services for free or sometimes in exchange for room and board. And all of those arrangements need to be thought through carefully, as we're going to discuss later in the presentation. Because they can have implications on future Medicaid qualification, which is eventually where we're going with this. If you can't stay at home, then there are really three other primary types of care. One is called independent living, and independent living doesn't really have a uniform definition, but you might have heard of community care retirement communities that have stair-step care, and independent living is when you are still in your own space, probably cooking your own meals, with a host of supports and activities that are available to you if you want to utilize them, but you don't have to, and you're still primarily doing all of your own self-care, but in a more supportive environment than your own home might have been. That's always going to be private pay. Then there's assisted living, which you may be familiar, which is a communal living arrangement for older adults, and the supports there are usually meal preparation, housekeeping, medication administration can be part of assisted living, transportation, so that you are getting assistance. Assisted living is going to be private pay, except for some individuals who are below a certain income threshold may be available for something called special assistance. And if that is you, then you might want to talk to an attorney about how to become eligible for special assistance in an assisted living situation. The final level of care is skilled nursing care, and that's when you need assistance with 2 or more activities of daily living, meaning maybe you can no longer bathe yourself. You certainly need help with cleaning, you may need help with dressing, you may need help with mobilization, and you need help with meal prep, possibly with eating. Skilled nursing can be very expensive at the end of the life, ranging from $6,500 to $7,500 a month for a semi-private room, up to as much as $10,000 a month for a private room. And there is not public funding available for that. So your Medicare, if you are hospitalized and need rehabilitory skilled care after hospitalization, Medicare is going to pay for 20 days and then co-pay a part of it for up to 100 days. But after 100 days, there is no Medicare benefit for skilled nursing care. And you are either looking at private pay or Medicaid. And Medicaid, as a source of payment for skilled nursing care at end of life, it is our societal payer of last resort. It's one that most people don't think of if they have gone through their life and never been a recipient of any other kind of Medicaid. It comes as a surprise to them at the end of life that they might want to and need to qualify for Medicaid for skilled nursing care. And so a good part of our presentation today is going to talk about how you can qualify without breaking the bank and without impoverishing a spouse and having to lose all of your assets. But before we get to that, let's have a brief couple of minutes about long-term care insurance, which some people have, some people don't, and it can be a piece of the puzzle in paying for care. And Brian's going to address that for just a few minutes.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And thanks, Heather. I think, we talk about private pay and paying for long-term care, whether you are aging in place at your home or in independent living, assisted living, even in skilled nursing. And the cost of that is really insurmountable. When I was talking earlier at the beginning about how we just didn't really plan for it, there's a lot of vehicles that we have financially that we plan for getting old. We have retirement accounts, we have life insurance, and we have all these things, but we don't think about long-term care insurance because it's just not that fun to think about, first of all, but it's just not something that comes up a lot in conversation, I think, and in planning and with your advisor or whoever's helping you, plan for retirement. But long-term care insurance is a really great product if you can get it. It used to be, historically, it was like a very traditional insurance. You'd pay into it, you'd have a premium, you'd pay into it for a while, and then when you needed it, you could access it. But it was set up in a way and was really designed in a way to make sure that a bunch of people got it and nobody ever used it. That was the purpose, right? So that's the greatest insurance scheme, right? Is to make sure everyone gets it and then no one uses it. Well, the problem is, as I mentioned earlier, people are living way longer than ever before. And so a bunch of people started needing access to it and they started getting it. And the insurance companies found, well, that they could just not sustain that and they couldn't afford it. So they've changed the model around a little bit. And so you can still get long-term care insurance. It's definitely something that you should talk to your insurance provider, whoever's providing your life insurance, talk to them about it, because the model now is different. They've basically taken sort of a two different approach, one of which is to use your life insurance. It's kind of a life insurance chassis, kind of like the foundation, but then they've added a long-term care insurance rider, which basically says that if you need long-term care insurance, you can accelerate that death benefit. You can start to access that death benefit a little early, and some portion of that death benefit you can gain access to help pay for long-term care. If you don't use the whole benefit that is available for long-term care and you die, then there is some death benefit left. If you use all the benefit that was made available for long-term care and when you die, maybe there's nothing left, and then you don't have the life insurance, the death benefit. But the point is that you can get it through a life insurance model. There's also an annuity type model, which is very similar, where you're paying in kind of a significant premium up front, and then it's paying out over time when you need that. The other couple of things with long-term care insurance to remember is if you do get it, there's a waiting period. So from between the time that you need it or you think you need it and the time they'll start paying you is usually about a 3-month gap. So you have to sort of keep that in mind when thinking ahead about that. And the other thing is that the long-term care insurance can be used to pay for that in-home care. It could be helped to pay for that nurse or care worker who comes into your home and helps take care of you, all the way up to the point of being in a nursing home and accessing. I had a gentleman the other day that I was talking to that's accessing $270 a day as his long-term care benefit in a skilled nursing. It's not going to pay for everything, but it's going to pay for most of it, and it's going to it's really taking care of his wife, and it's going to take care of his wife for over 2 years. Just on a $200,000 benefit that they have. So it's really going to help them in a way that they don't necessarily have to access that Medicaid benefit. But it's not something everyone can get, and so it's worth talking to your insurance folks about that. That said,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say a tip on that is you probably shouldn't wait until you are at the age where you need the long-term care to look into the insurance.
No, definitely not.
Right. The time to do that is 20 or 25 years before that phase of life is when it's going to be more affordable to work that kind of a product into your overall long-term plan.
That's right.
But let's say that you don't have long-term care insurance, or even if you do have long-term care insurance, sometimes a Medicaid plan, sometimes an end-of-life care plan can include reliance on long-term care insurance and private pay and Medicaid, and a combination of all of those things over a course of many years. So let's spend a couple minutes talking about the Medicaid piece and the basic rules of eligibility and some of our goals when we're working with clients to think through how Medicaid might be a part of their long-term care strategy. First of all, just kind of the bottom line nitty-gritty. And again, let me clarify, we are speaking about long-term care Medicaid benefits in skilled nursing facilities. It's a totally different set of rules for other types of Medicaid eligibility. But for long-term care, an individual who wants to qualify has to have less than $2,000 in countable assets. So that's the real trick, is taking someone who probably over the course of life may have accumulated a home, a car, property, perhaps a 401k or some retirement savings, maybe some other kinds of assets, and getting them down to $2,000 of countable assets. Countable being the operative word. And there are many, many regulations and cases written on what that means. We won't go into all of those today, but that's part of our job, is to look at your assets and help you determine which would be countable and put you over the $2,000 threshold and which would not. There is not an income threshold for long-term care Medicaid qualification. So except that, so the way that it works is if you qualify and if we get you below the threshold of 2,000 in countable assets, your income will be paid to the skilled nursing facility as the first dollars. You get to keep a personal allowance of $30 a month, and all of your income above that is paid to the nursing facility. So if you have, say, $2,500 a month and your care is $7,500 a month, then your $2,500 will be paid to skilled nursing plus your $30 allowance, and the remaining $5,000 will be paid by Medicaid. If you have $3,500, then Medicaid will pay the balance. You're not included in your countable assets are going to be your home with equity value up to around $500,000, your one car, and all of your tangible personal property, your furniture, your clothing, your household items. Those don't count. So when we're looking at assets that might be countable, it's potentially everything else but those basic. And so we really have three goals with you and looking to qualify you. The first is going to be to convert as many of your countable assets to non-countable as we can. The second, assuming that we have successfully converted assets to non-countable, is to look at what non-countable assets that you will continue to own while you are on Medicaid and determine what will happen to those assets when you die. Because Medicaid, the state of North Carolina, or any state that you live in that's offering Medicaid, is going to have a creditor claim in your estate where they will be entitled to be repaid from your estate assets the amounts that were paid on your behalf during your lifetime. So for example, if you owned a home, and let's say you had $300,000 of equity in that home, your home was not countable, and so you probably qualified for Medicaid while continuing to own the home. But if you die still owning the home, that is now a $300 asset that can be utilized to satisfy a Medicaid claim against your estate. So our second goal, after we have converted assets from countable to non-countable, is to try to restructure assets to the extent that we legally can, to be sure that they will not be a part of your estate and cannot be subject to a Medicaid recovery estate claim. Finally, if you have a spouse, we have a third goal that is around allowing your spouse to take maximum advantage of certain rules that are very favorable, because we don't want to impoverish a spouse. Just because we need to get you down to $2,000 of assets doesn't mean your spouse is going to live in poverty for the rest of their life. And so there are all kinds of safe harbor provisions that allow spouses to have more income, a portion of your income, and at greater than $2,000 of your assets. And those rules are rather complex, but it becomes a very important part of our planning to be sure that your spouse is taken care of. So those are our goals in Medicaid planning. And you've probably heard, everyone has, about the 5-year look-back rule, which is also a very important part of Medicaid planning. So I'll turn it back over to Brian to talk to you about what not to do.
That's right. So, and I want to make one sort of clarifying point, something that Heather said, she's talking about an income test. There is I guess there there's sort of technically an income test. If you make over $7,000 a month in income, you're not going to qualify for Medicaid. So I don't, most people don't, I certainly don't. And most people are not making $7,000 or more a month in gross, that's a gross amount in income. And so, that's usually what is what, anyway. So there's a little bit of an income test, but I just wanted to make sure that's clear. So yes, as Heather said, if you Google Medicaid eligibility in a nursing home, probably the first response or many responses that you're going to get is this thing called a look back. And people are like, what is the look back? What is the 5-year look back? And I hear about it all the time. Very simply put, it's this. Don't give your stuff away. That's what I mean. That's the root of the story. Don't give your stuff away. If there's a possibility that you think you or your spouse or loved one might need Medicaid or might need nursing home care within the next 5 years, the moral of the story is don't give your stuff away. And here's why. When you go to apply for Medicaid, the first thing they do is they say, on the date you apply, they say, okay, I want to look back 5 years and do a complete forensic accounting. I mean, it's a very, very thorough accounting. I tell people that I think the Medicaid office has more access to more records than our FBI does. I mean, they can get just about everything you ever did in the last 5 years. So if you think that you did some, that maybe something happened, you don't want to tell, trust me, they're going to find out. So they do this complete forensic accounting for 5 years to see, have you given anything away? Thinking again on this, if you gave something away in an attempt to qualify for Medicaid, that shouldn't be allowed, and they will penalize you for that. And there's a penalty, sort of in doing that, in transferring the asset or giving something away. So this is things like, I hear about, well, I don't have to worry about the house that Heather talked about because I went ahead and put my son's name on my house. I just put his name on the deed. He's going to get it anyway. I want him to have it. Well, that's a gift. If he didn't pay you for that, if he didn't pay you to get his name on that deed, you gave him a gift at a value that is going to be equivalent to the percentage of his ownership. So if he's a 50% owner, you and him own it together, and your house was worth $100,000, you've given him effectively $50,000. So that is not, they do not look favorably upon that when so be really cautious about that. Or I loaned my son a bunch of money and I went ahead and just forgave the loans. I don't want to bother with it. Well, that's essentially a gift as well. So you have to be really careful about giving anything away. And what they're looking at is anything pretty much over, I tell people, anything over like $1,000 is going to draw a red flag. And that's what I really want to look at. But really they could assess you a transfer penalty for any gift that you make in that 5-year period. Now, there are some exceptions to that rule. And I don't want to sound too, like doom and gloom. If you've done something 2-3 years ago that's, all for naught and you're just, you're stuck. They will look at, was the gift made for the purposes, or was the transfer made for the purposes of qualifying for Medicaid? That can be a hard road to uphill battle to try and argue with them that, hey, I made that gift 4 years ago, but it had nothing to do with Medicaid. It had to do with my son needed surgery and I gave him some money to help pay for surgery. You can make that argument, but it's an argument you have to make. You're in a position now that you have to argue your case. So it's not advisable, but again, it's not, all hope is not lost. So they're looking at, why did you make the gift? They're looking at, how much did you get? Maybe you gave something away. People will sell the car for $50. All right, well, you sold your car for $50. Well, the car was worth $1,000. So you gave away $950. So they're looking at what was the value of the gift that you made? And that's going to come into play. They're going to look at what's the hardship that was created, by, if you're in a hardship situation now that you made this transfer, and now, you're in such a bad spot that really you have no other option but to get this level of care. And the gift can't be reversed, or it can't be cured in some way, or can't be explained. So they're going to consider that as well, but it's just a factor of consideration, and it is by no means a guarantee. So you have to be really careful. In some cases, we can undo a transfer. So you put Johnny's name on the deed. Well, we can take his name off the deed and we reverse the gift. Maybe you loan someone some money and they are able to pay you back, well, then you reverse that gift in that way. Or you've sold him the car for $50, it was worth $1,000. He's gone ahead and paid you the extra $950. So there's some ways in which you can reverse the gift and then you don't experience that penalty. And then there are also some exceptions to gifts that you can make. So you can give stuff to your spouse without any penalty, for example. If you have a disabled child, and by a disabled child of any age, so you could have a 60-year-old child who is disabled, you can give all your stuff to them. There's a lot of other factors and considerations with that, which we don't have time to get into today, but it's something that you can do and know. If they have a disabled child of any age, you can gift all of your assets to them without a penalty. And there's some other little exceptions like that that are worth talking to somebody about if you've done something or you're thinking about doing something. But from the moral of the story, what do I want you to walk away with today? Don't give your stuff away. If you do give your stuff away, you need to be prepared for the fact that you probably or may not qualify for Medicaid for the next 5 years.
So, and as usual, when Brian and I give a presentation together, we could talk for way more than the time allotted. So I know we're down to about the last 5 minutes here, and we probably have another 20 minutes of material. So I'm going to try to give you just the top level bullet points of what we want you to think about in two situations. There are really two times when clients come to us. One is to do prospective, long-term, forward-looking Medicaid planning. That would be, you just got a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. You just got a diagnosis of Parkinson's. You have just learned that you have a long-term degenerative condition that for most people requires care at the end of the disease, although not necessarily at the beginning of the disease. So in these situations, our clients have some time with a relatively high certainty of care at the end of that time. The second situation is when you've had a crisis event and you need Medicaid now, and I'm going to let Brian kind of give you the overview of what we do in that situation. But in the long-term situation, what we would say is, please make an appointment to come and talk to your attorney as you consider the long-term trajectory of your disease and what your care needs will be and your financial plan for them. There are 4 primary things we can do if you give us the benefit of the time. With this 5-year look-back period to work with, we might decide to go ahead and make some transfers of assets to a spouse, to a child, because we believe we can wait the 5 years, that we're not going to need to qualify for Medicaid for at least 5 years. And so the transfer will be outside of the look-back period. That might allow you to make gifts. It's an important strategy when there is long-term care insurance. Perhaps we can rely on long-term care insurance to pay for some of that 5-year, or maybe there are enough assets saved to fill in the gap. So intentional transfers with a 5-year wait is one thing we can do. Another thing we can do is put assets into certain kinds of trusts. There are several kinds of trusts in which you can put assets, and those assets will be protected from Medicaid. But I can tell you that one kind of trust that will not protect your assets from Medicaid is a revocable or living trust, which is probably the most common kind of trust that most people have in their estate plan for different reasons. So if you have one of those trusts and you're now looking at potential Medicaid qualification, then you should have that reviewed. Caregiver contracts, and I talked about this at the beginning. You may have someone coming into your home. It may be your daughter, it may be your granddaughter who's going to come and live with you and care for you, and you want to pay that person. Because you are paying a family member inside the 5-year period, there is a presumption that you are making a gift to that person. So if you want to legitimately pay a family member for care, you need to do that pursuant to a specific written contract that is signed by both parties in advance of making those payments. And that will allow you to transfer funds to your family member providing care within that 5-year window. Finally, real estate. There are many ways in North Carolina to protect real estate, both in advance and in a crisis planning. And I'm not even going to run through all of those, but let me just say that the state of North Carolina doesn't necessarily want you to lose the family farm, and you don't need to lose the family farm. And it's well worth having a conversation with an attorney about that in that situation. In the last 2 minutes, I'll let Brian talk about crisis planning, and then we're out.
Yeah, and so again, I won't never be able to do it any justice, but I will say this. Here's what I want you to know. If you are in care, or you have a spouse that's in care, or maybe they're in the hospital and they're going to be stepping down into care, and you're having a conversation with the social worker about needing to go into long-term care, and it's going to be longer than any 20 days that Medicare is going to give you. Maybe your loved one is in a nursing home right now, and you've been burning through some cash, and you're trying to, you're afraid, and maybe the nursing home has mentioned to you, well, there's this Medicaid thing and you should think about it. Just because you're like on the precipice or you're in the care doesn't mean all hope is lost. And I want you to know that it would be really worth your time and frankly your money to give an elder law attorney a call. And I'm going to give a special plug to the elder law attorneys at Van Winkle, which are me and Heather, but also to elder law attorneys in the practice generally, because that's a lot of what elder law specifically and that area of practice really helps folks do, is to navigate the web and complexities of long-term care and figuring out how to pay for it. So call an elder law attorney. I think it would really benefit you just in the time, the hour of the conversation that you might have could potentially save you thousands and thousands of dollars and a lot of stress and heartache. There is a good chance if you call in that situation, there's a good chance that we might be able to protect some or most of your assets. And I'm never going to say we can protect them all, but there's a good chance we can protect a lot of them. You just gotta give us a call. You gotta talk to somebody about it. And so my plug to elder law attorneys generally and to us specifically is, if you are in that situation, give us a call. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's talk through some of the issues and figure out, is there a system or is there a dynamic or a strategy, rather, a plan that we could put in place that's going to be comfortable for you, that you'll feel good about, but that could also protect some of your assets. I honestly think is worth it. So thank you all again so much for joining us. Please come back on Thursday. We're going to be talking, and well, I'm not going to be talking, but someone from Nicole will be talking about, not Heather either. But a couple other attorneys are going to be talking about revocable trusts and irrevocable trusts and how to utilize those in an effective estate plan. And then we've got some more sessions next week and following. So come back, and thank you all so much again for joining us. Have a great day.